guys. If I'm going too fast, please tell me to slow down. Once again, you can follow along on Google Classroom. At the end of the third period, just before lunch, Principal Carrington declared the afternoon a snow day and told us all to go home. Outside, the streets were dusted like powdered sugar, and the snowbanks around the sidewalks were tiny white and gray mounds that reached out as high as my ankles. But we were told that a little after midday, easterly winds would be blowing through the city. We were told that the guests would threaten to rip trees out from the concrete and would bring with them the type of snow you wish for at Christmas. The type of snow that whites out the blueness of the sky, that forces cars to crawl inch by inch on the highway, because whiteness is all anyone can see. And Principal Carrington was kicking us out before we could be trapped inside to wreak havoc on her school. "Ah, yeah," my class started to howl. Even I joined the others when they banged their fists on the desks. I was in extended French, and all of my classes today were Madame Rizzoli. I would have wished for an earthquake to get out of spending even one more minute trying to translate my thoughts into another language. "Snow day, snow day, snow day," we chanted. "Tassez-vous," Madame Rizzoli snapped, putting her hands on her hips. "You are all 8th graders, act like it." We pressed our smiling lips together, and our shoulders shook with silent laughter. "Snow day, snow day, snow day," we whispered. "J'ai dit, tassez-vous." Once again, guys, this is not a French class, it's an English class, so please forgive my French pronunciation. Principal Carrington was still talking, her voice garbled by the PA system. "Those of you who have younger siblings in the school and those of you whose parents checked off, stay at school in the event of a weather emergency. Please report to the office. The rest of you, get home safely." Madame Rizzoli turned away from the PA and faced the front of the room. "Okay, everyone walk. I repeat, walk to your lockers and collect your things. À demain." "À demain," we repeated. The entire class ran, rushing to the door all at once, ramming against each other, trying to be the first ones to spill out into the hallway. I waited at my desk for the crowd to thin out so I could leave at my own pace without pushing against anyone. I had nowhere to hurry to. Rochelle joined me as I headed out to the classroom and told me all of our friends were going to hang out at her place for the rest of the day. Was I coming? "I can't. My mom checked off the box," I said. "So, just leave. You know these white bread teachers don't give a shit about what you do." The rest of our friends, Anita, Jordan, and Aishani, were all at their lockers packing their things. Anita came over to us, twirling her straightened hair into a ponytail high up on her head. "No fret, Chell. You know she's not gonna come. She too 'fraid of mummy. Got her on lockdown and shit. She canna even run cross the street for buy a patty at lunch." "Kara, I live 2 streets over from you," Rochelle said. "Just come." I had never been to Rochelle's house when her mother wasn't around, and never for more than a couple of hours. My mother always called me home way before the other girls had to leave. And every time I was forced to leave, something good would happen. Truth or Dare, or a scary movie, or on TV, or a game of Nicky Nicky Nine Doors. The next day they'd all laugh about a moment I'd missed. I'd smile with them, and then they would look at me, all of their eyebrows raised. "What are you laughing at? You weren't even there." They would continue to giggle. And I would bite my lip and watch. To stay in the group, thick skin was a must. Being able to take an insult was respected as much as being able to throw shade. Ishani and Jordan tilted their heads up in my direction. "So what's going on, Kara?" they asked. "You coming?" "Just come," said Rochelle. "You never do anything." There were no adults in the hallway to see me leave, and Rochelle was right. The teachers here really didn't care about you if you weren't a student in their class anyway. It wasn't like my old school downtown on Ferndale Avenue, where everything and everyone was under watch. I'd had to beg my mother to transfer me out and away from those kids who were so eager to comment on my thick lips and grab fistfuls of my kinky hair. Beg her to let me do my 2 years of junior high around my neighborhood, around my friends from the block. "If you get into any serious trouble, I will pull you out and roll you back downtown. You understand me?" she said. "That includes failing math." "Yes, Mummy." I looked back towards the stairs that led up to the office, rubbing my palm against the back of my neck. "I told you she'd stay," said Anita, smirking. For once, I wanted to shock that smirk off her face. I turned to her. "Fuck it," I said. "Let's go." Anita narrowed her eyes as I opened my locker and started packing my things. Everyone had left the hallway except us. Rochelle and the rest were grouped together in a circle, wearing cropped winter jackets with fur-trimmed hoods, their hair freshly relaxed or pulled back into ringleted ponytails, their tight jeans tucked into suede boots that reached their knees. I didn't look as good in my clothes as they did in theirs. I had no meat on my bones, no pout to my lips, and they were all starting to curve into that thickness that island boys loved. Their eyebrows cocked in that flirty curiosity that got those boys' attention. "They're fast," my mother would say, "and one of them is going to end up pregnant. Just watch." Behind me, Jordan and Ishani were arguing over just how cute Jamar, the student council president, was. Ishani rolling the R's with her tongue every time. She was Indian, like from India Indian, but told any boy who swaggered up to her that she was Trini, and explained that being born in Canada meant she couldn't put on the accent. Once we asked her where the capital of Trinidad was. When she said Tobago, we all doubled over laughing. And later on that day, she pulled me to the side and asked what was so funny about her answer. I zipped up my jacket and swung my knapsack over my shoulder. "Hey, look at this! Kara, take charge. She thinks she a bad gal, for she break the rules day," said Jordan, laughing with Rochelle. "She'll probably cave halfway to your house and run back to school, shell." "Quiet, Anita. You run your mouth too much," I said. "What's this? Miss Canada gwine for bust out the patois." "You need to stop faking it, Kara." I opened my mouth to respond, but felt my shoulders roll back, felt acrid spit fill my mouth, and knew I looked the way the women in my family did when they had a loud point to make. Trouble usually followed whenever they spoke in that stance, and I wasn't up for that. I kept walking. I always lost when I went head-to-head with Anita anyway. Her comebacks were harsher, and her accent was better. Real. Not something she had to put on. The rest of us just cobbled together what we could from listening to our parents or grandparents, but Anita was fresh from Jamaica. There was no competing, especially when I had the weakest accent out of all the Canadian-borns. We pushed through the doors and stepped out into the schoolyard. The snow had started to fall light and fast and fluffy. It was good for packing, for snowmen and snowballs, but I wasn't fooled. This was how all storms started, gently. We all tugged our hoods over our heads, Rochelle and Anita squealing every time the snow dappled their straightened strands with wetness. Already I could see the frizz coming out, kinky and tight, disrupting the silkiness they'd endured the hot comb over the night before. I grazed my palm over my scalp to see if my braids were still smooth. They weren't, but it could have been worse. Our school was right at Vaughan and Oakwood, hidden in one of the residential pockets in the center of the area where the Caribbean and Europe converged. Once you left the playground, you could turn right toward downtown and head to Little Italy on St. Clair West. But we were turning up left towards Eglinton West and Marley Island Town. The walk in either direction was mixed with both groups, though. Bungalow windows boasted the colorful banners of the island flags, red, yellow, and green for Guyana, black, yellow, and green for Jamaica. Nonas and nonos crowded every other porch, teetering on rocking chairs, drinking beer or brio shinoto, their pit bulls snarling in the backyard. I can't get my hood to stay on, said Jordan, bunching up her jacket at the neck so that the snow wouldn't get through the gap melt on her chest. White girls can get their hair wet, said Rochelle. Stop frontin' like you need your hood. The rest of us laughed, and Jordan gave us the finger. She was mixed. Her mother was black Guyanese, and her father was Canadian. 7th generation Canadian, too. Not Italian Canadian or Portuguese or anything. She'd come out a light milky brown, almost beige, with a small pointed nose, hazel eyes, and hair that was short and auburn, and kind of curly, but mostly straight. The year before, she'd done a home spray tan to make herself darker, but ended up making herself orange instead. I was the only one who knew that. I don't know if it was because I didn't go to school with everyone yet, or because she knew I was too nice to say anything to anyone. But she'd told the others she couldn't go to school because of the flu. The snow was up to our shins now, and the wind had started slanting its fall, blowing it in our direction so that snowflakes pelted into our eyes and stuck our eyelashes together. I nuzzled my nose against my scarf and trudged forward. Some of the boys in our grade had decided to play in the playground, whipping snowballs at each other, their screams and laughter too stubborn to be drowned out by the wind. Let's get fries from New Orleans Donuts, said Aishani. I'm starving. It's too cold to walk around. We can order pizza at my place, said Rochelle. With what money? You've got like $2 to your name, said Jordan. That's $2 more than you. And anyway, my mom left me money for an emergency. We're good. But I feel for fries, said Aishani. No one had said anything about stopping anywhere. I turned to them, but tried to keep my face buried in my hood, more as a way to hide my panicked expression than to shield myself from the cold. Can we just go to Shell's house? That's what we should do. If you're going to be this way, you should just go back to school, said Anita. Well, I actually don't care where we go, said Rochelle, as long as we go Vaughan way. What's so special about Vaughan way? Said Jordan. You always want to walk that way. I just like it, said Rochelle. Yeah, but why? The high school was on Vaughan Road, and Rochelle was seeing a guy who went there, Chris Richardson, grade 10. Every girl knew Chris, every mother too. He never kept himself out of trouble, trespassing, tagging buildings, mouthing off to cops who spot-checked him and his crew at the park or in front of McDonald's or by the bus. But he was always quick to carry your mother's grocery bags to the door or help your grandmother find a seat in church. And he did it all with sly silences and toothy smiles, and if you were lucky, a wink behind your mother's back. Be careful of boys like him, they'd tell us. You need to stay clear from bright-eyed boys like that. Your dad was like that, my mother would say, and look how I turned out. The day Chris and Rochelle first said, "Hey," to each other, we went to Vaughan Road Academy for a tour, trying to see if that was the school we wanted to spend the next 4 years at. Me pretending like I had a say in where I ended up. He stopped her in the hallway, took her by the hand, and guided her to him, putting his hands around her waist as she stood in the space between his spread out legs. It was a move she was used to. Rochelle had that really fair rose brown complexion, that kind of red skin and shapely heaviness that made cars slow down and girls up down. And she'd been dealing with hungry-eyed boys since she was 10. While they were talking, I pretended to flip through the notes my mother had told me to write down. Far enough behind Rochelle that I wasn't interrupting, but close enough that if she wanted out, she could just turn to me and we'd walk away together, our arms linked. Chris had thought she was a transfer student, a sophomore like him. And only when he took her number down did Rochelle tell him she just turned 14 and was in grade 8. First, he got quiet. Then he left without saying bye. But later on that night, she called me and said that he'd rung her up and they'd just finished a 3-hour conversation. Just don't tell anyone, she said. It's a secret, okay? Sometimes we both pictured the licks she'd get if her mother ever found out about Chris, and Rochelle's mum didn't play around. She used the belt. My mother didn't like to use objects. She always said her hands were sharp enough. I tried to imagine keeping something like a boy from her. If a boy ever showed any interest in me, and I felt my body turn in on itself. Even the backs of my eyeballs throbbed as if they'd grown strained from searching for her open-palmed hand. It was how I felt when I let myself think that a storefront boy might be smirking at me. A panic would creep up on my body like a slow-moving fever, and then for a brief moment, I'd feel glad that I wasn't sexy enough to keep a secret like Rochelle's. Alright, on page 38. We crossed the street to New Orleans Donuts and stumbled over ourselves to get inside and out of the snow. The warmth of the shop was heavy with the smell of frying batter and loud with the sounds of chatter mixed with the pew-pews of the 2 arcade games by the washroom. It was packed. Each of the 4 corner tables had been seized by a school, from high school kids from Vaughan Road Academy. They took up 2 tables. To other students from our school, to the kids from St. Thomas Aquinas, another Catholic school just up the street from ours. Rochelle scanned the store, her eyes slowly sweeping over the boys in oversized coats and fur trapper hats. When she found Chris over by the window, in the corner across from the entrance, sprawled out and laughing with 3 of his friends, she took off her hood, shook her hair back, and looked the other way in a display of nonchalance. I was the only one who noticed the move, and I couldn't tell if her plan was working. Chris was focused on his friends still, all of them bumping fists and shoving shoulders and shouting. That's respect, man, that's respect. But his attention seemed to have shifted somehow. Even though he never looked away from his group, it was like he knew ours had arrived. But maybe he did with all the girls. Maybe he was just weighing his options. His friends appeared oblivious. I recognized all 3 of them. They didn't have reputations like Chris's, but they were the boys you went after if Chris wasn't into you. They were the boys Anita, Aishani, and Jordan got. Aishani bought a large poutine and found us a deserted table in the middle of the store. We all started digging in with our plastic forks, the fries nice and crunchy beneath the hot gravy and melting cheese curds. I'm just saying, said Jordan. I find snow romantic. What's romantic about this? We're in a fucking storm. I'm with Anita on this one, said Aishani. Nothing romantic about freezing your ass off. Well, obviously not this kind of storm. Like the snow in that movie, you know, the one with the white dude? Oh yeah, the movie with the white dude. You guys know what I'm talking about. They meet at a store and spend an amazing night together or whatever. But she's white girl flaky. So she writes her number in a book that's going to be sold the next day. And like 5 years later, he's still trying to find that number. He's still trying to find that number? Searching in bookstores and shit? Shell, you were with me when I saw it with Jackie. I knew what movie she was talking about. I'd seen it twice. But I joined in with the others and stared at her blankly. Anyway, they finally meet at an ice rink and it's snowing, and they make out in the snow. You wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want that? I would. And if not snow, then rain. We can't do snow or rain. Think about your hair. I took off my hood and rubbed the top of my head. Look, Shell. Everyone turned to Rochelle, whose hair was now in the stage between natural and straightened. Puffs of tangled curls spiraled out from behind her ears, while the part of her hair that was still straight lay flat atop the kinks, giving her a bizarre mushroom head. She looks like a palm tree. Fuck off, said Rochelle. But then she touched the back of her head and glanced in Chris's direction. Wait, do I really, though? Anita nodded, and Rochelle rushed to the washroom. I took another forkful of poutine and smiled at the gentle embarrassment I'd caused. No real harm was done, but the insult was enough to make Jordan snigger appreciatively, which earned me points. No one said anything for a bit, each of us focusing on our forks, fighting each other for more cheese on our fries. Then Aishani spoke. Kara, I think Chris is looking at you. And his boy Devon, said Jordan. I tried to keep my eyes from widening with alarm. What? Yeah, he's been staring at you since we came in, said Aishani. Maybe he's just checking for Shell, I said. They always check for her. Rochelle returned to the table, her hair in a high ponytail with a thin black headband around her edges to hide the frizz. What's going on? Chris and Devon are checking Kara out, said Jordan. I don't know what they're talking about, I said quickly. Too quickly. Rochelle turned around, and after a few seconds, she looked back at me and giggled. They're checking you out for sure. You got eyes in your head? I don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I looked at Rochelle for some sort of sign, some kind of wordless communication to signal how I was supposed to react in the situation, but she didn't give me anything. Ratted! Devon is smiling at you. Smile back, Kara, said Jordan. Or wave or something. He's looking at you. No, he's not, I said. Anita spoke this time. Well, he won't be checking for you when you look so tore up. True, said Rochelle. Go to the bathroom, pat down your braids, put on some makeup or something for once. She rooted around in her knapsack and took out the makeup bag she hid from her mother. It was a slim case, pink and white, with wide petaled flower designs all over. She handed it to me. Guana? I don't know. They all shouted at me. Guana? The bathroom was small and kind of grimy. It only had 2 gray-doored stalls, and the white ceramic tile was yellowed and dirt-grubbed. The mirror above the sink was foggy, almost opaque. I could barely see my reflection, much less use it as a guide to put on makeup. I was about to go back to the table when the doors swung open, and Devon walked in. He was short for a guy, but a good 2 inches taller than me. He had mahogany skin and a smooth oval face, eyelashes longer than most girls, and really broad shoulders. He could probably carry me around on his back. I thought about what my mother would say if she were standing where I was, how she'd raised her head and set her jaw how her voice would echo around the room, but all I could say was, "You know this is the girls' washroom, right?" He smiled at me a little. "Your friends told me you were waiting for me in here." "What? No." "Your girl Rochelle said for me to come in here." I waited for him to say something else, but he didn't. There was only one door, and he was standing right by it. I couldn't imagine Rochelle telling him that, setting me up like that. I couldn't even imagine Anita doing it. Our group could be hurtful, but never cruel. Devon had to have come in on his own. I headed toward the exit, but he shifted his weight so that he was in front of the door. "I want to leave." I hope my voice sounded forceful enough. "Why?" His tongue was light, like he and I were playing a game, a sick, nerve-wracking game. "Don't be scared," he said. I was scared, but I didn't want him to know that. I wanted him to think I could hold my own. I wanted them all to think that. He took a step closer to me. I took a step back. That made him chuckle, and he leaned back against one of the stalls. "Chris told me you were shy. I get it. Let's just go slow. Chris doesn't know anything about me." "He said you were a quiet one, always chillin' behind your girls. Come on, don't be scared," he said again. Rushing towards the door crossed my mind, but if Devon managed to block me from leaving, that would just make everything worse. I took a step forward, and he pushed off from the stall. "My food is getting cold." He was only a foot or so from me now. "I bought it with the last of my allowance. I'll get you another one." He closed in on me, reaching up with his left hand, and pushed one of the braids off my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. My skin burned. "I want to go," I said it again. "Don't be like that." His thumb was under my chin, gently tilting it upward. I turned my head away. "Kara?" I flinched at hearing him say my name, and almost screamed when the door opened again. Devon looked behind to see who'd come in, and I moved quickly past the girl at the door and hurried back to our table. The chairs were empty, pushed out from the table, crumpled, gravy-stained napkins and empty styrofoam containers littered the tabletop. I looked around, but I couldn't find Rochelle and the others anywhere in the store. And white was all I could see out the windows. Blue squiggles were on one of the napkins, and I picked it up. "Sorry," Jordan's handwriting. I stared at it. They'd really left me. Devon sauntered back over to his corner, the swag in his step telling me that a lie had been whispered, that the girl from the washroom now had gossip to spread. I wasn't so quiet anymore, and everyone would know. Laughter boomed out from the corner. Devon's friends were eyeing me and giving him props, nodding their heads in my direction. Only Chris seemed to be straight-faced and uninterested. "Just chill, Devon," I heard him say. "What's up with you? Just calm yourself." The loud chatter in the store trailed into mutters, and I could feel everyone glancing at me. There was no one here to have my back. The way Devon had come on, forceful without force, the stories I knew he was telling his friends, embarrassed me in a way my mother and grandmother had prepared me for. But the loneliness that that empty table made me feel was new and unexpected in a way that made it hard to breathe. I ran out into the snow, not bothering to cover my hair or button my coat. I didn't even know where I was going or where the parking lot ended and the street began. I couldn't see if there were any cars on the road or if there was anyone else walking. I wasn't even supposed to be out here. "Hey," a voice called. "Ayo!" I ignored it, and I lowered my head to my chest to keep my face from cutting snow, making sure I only stepped in the footholes made from people who'd managed through earlier. There was a small black glove on the ground, and I hoped it belonged to Rochelle or Jordan, or anyone from the group that had her hand was rainbow of white blue, and purple. I hoped they were all freezing, that little icicles were formed on their eyelashes and making them stick together. I hoped and prayed that their hair would give way to the wetness and tangle on itself, nodding and coiling, shrinking and puffing, so that they'd cry out when their mothers combed through it before they went to bed. And I wouldn't be there to listen to them whisper sheepishly about how they bawled and screamed from respite from the pain. I wouldn't be there to listen to them whisper about anything anymore. A hand touched my shoulder and I whirled around. The person took a step back. It was Chris. Sorry, you weren't turning around. It's freezing out here. I can't see shit. What do you want? To give you a ride? I have my brother's car today. No. I started walking again. He kept pace beside me, trudging through fresh snow. Why? I just want to give you a ride. We were nearing what I thought was the sidewalk, and I stopped walking, trying to reach a decision about where I wanted to go. Rochelle's house was on Hopewell Avenue, not too far. If I followed them there, they'd know I could take whatever they threw at me, and if I didn't, they'd write me off as sensitive. The worst thing you could be in that group in this neighborhood. Listen, said Chris, what Devon did was foul. I know that. If you know, who are you going to tell? He paused and then sighed, silently admitting to what I already knew. Boys didn't rat on each other even if they were in the wrong, especially if they were in the wrong. Your girl snaked you. Devon snaked you. Just let me give you a ride. I won't do anything. My car is right there. He pointed to what looked like an old Honda parked in front of New Orleans Donuts. The wind howled and I shivered in my jacket. Whatever. He didn't speak on the way over to his car. We didn't speak on the way over to his car, and once we were inside, he cranked the heat up to full blast and turned on the radio so that 50 Cent's beat bumped in the car. I cupped my hands around my mouth and breathed on them, rubbing my palms together. Going to Rochelle's seemed like the expected thing to do, almost like a natural choice, but something that felt like doubt hollowed out my stomach. Joining them might prove that I could shake off humiliation, but I would also prove that there were no limits to the kind of humiliation they could put me through. Chris backed out slowly and told me he had to put his hand on the back of my headrest so he could see better. It wasn't until we were already on the road that I began to wonder if anyone had seen me get in. If there was even just one person who'd been able to make me out through the snow. Where should I take you? The heat from the car started steaming up the windows, and my eye followed a water droplet streak down the glass. I thought about my grandmother and how when I was a child and a creak in the house or a squeak of a chair made me flinch, she'd say, Duppy know who fi frighten? The first time she said it, I asked her what it meant, and she only told me that I had to learn to steel myself so I wouldn't be a target for any ghost, so spirit and human would know better than to target me and would know to leave me alone. Kara, said Chris, where do you want to go? I faced front and put my hands to my mouth again. Just take me back to school, I said. Okay, and that's the end of Snow Day. What did we think?